Davis and maybe get an invite onto the tug. And so that's very, very important. But in those 3 days, several things happen. McClellan keeps having success. They have one other side hope here is that all these important people are just talking to him like they're friends, you know. They don't know about the plot. Jefferson Davis has already said that he thinks he might put Robert E. Lee in charge of fighting McClellan and go with him. So again, he would be down there awful close to the enemy lines if they could somehow just drag him across. And by the way, also, twice since they've been in Richmond already, they have already started to move the capital from Richmond back to Montgomery, Alabama, to deep in their south. And they quit both times on that. But the motion's already set at the drop of a hat. They had the wagons there and all that stuff, and they might move it. That would also, of course, ruin their particular plot here also. General Smith, by the way, the only guy they've met so far on the trip that didn't like him much, he's now in Richmond. And not only is he there, he's around at Dennison house all the time because he wants to ask Alice out himself. Of course, she has nothing to do with him. Also, this Johnny Walker has had everything stolen up in Virginia and Shenandoah Valley, so now he's there. And all of a sudden they find him in a disguise, follow him everywhere they go. He's intent on proving that they're spies, and he's going to shoot them if nothing else himself. So now we got 3 things working here, starting to make him think maybe it's time to get out of town here. One of the men that that is sort of in charge of them is an adjutant named Captain Alexander. And he really likes them, and they like him. They even make plans to meet in Paris after the war. They like each other so much that it's over. And unbeknownst to him, you know, he's helping them so much, but he doesn't really know their particular plan. But anyway, lost my train of thought. Oh, well, let's just stay with the Captain Alexander. By the way, Captain Alexander is famous in Confederate history. Anybody know why? Only Confederate to ever escape from Fort McHenry. He did so by switching clothes with his wife when she came to visit him. Same guy, Captain Alexander here. And anyway, eventually he gets permission from higher-ups to give him passes to go anywhere in the South they want, to use the railroads free. He warns them about all the desperados and deserters in the mountain gaps and which ones not to go into and which ones not to go into as they make their way back out the Shenandoah Valley to Washington, D.C. So and he gives them 3 of the best horses left in Richmond to ride on this trip. So he is really very, very important to them. And then, of course, there's some more romance in here. They start meeting in the downstairs room. Of course, the door's open and all the lights on after everybody goes to bed. And the romance is really getting serious here between Aramis and Miss Alice. And they betroth each other and all this. And she wants to go with him. Even after he tells them why he's there, she's still so young and so much in love. She says, it doesn't matter. I'll go anywhere with you. So, women. I swear. They go make one last trip to the French embassy and get another $1,000 worth of gold and some more bank drafts and some more passes. So I mean, they are really set at this particular time to take off and get out of Dodge. And Walker shows himself again, and General Smith is still very suspicious of him. So they are watching him very close, and they decided to take off. And this red line I've drawn here is basically their route on horseback up to here. Then they went up here, then through the Shenandoah Valley and up here. When they get to Orange County Courthouse, 1 mile west is a plantation that belongs to Mr. Stanton, and he has a beautiful young daughter. The wife is already dead. Most of the slaves have been already taken, and the troops are close to them. And they get there, and Atros has a little fling with Miss Stanton. She's got this huge St. Bernard dog that supposedly just hates every man that approaches her and won't let anybody near her. Atros walks right up, pets her, and he starts following him around instead of the girl. And eventually, she will give him that dog and the head slave. And so the 3 of them, plus the dog and the head slave, will then go from their plantation up through here. The slave went with them up to the Shenandoah River, then he went back to the plantation. They kept the dog. They crossed the Shenandoah River with the dog. So anyway, and another big break for this love story is, Major Dennis has so much pull, he gets an ambulance wagon pulled by 4 mules or 6 and 20-man escort, and they bring Miss Ellis up to the plantation to see Emeritus off. And so then they go back to Richmond for safety with that same caravan. So things are still working out here pretty good with them. And again, just try to keep the story pretty short. Again, they do get out of the valley. It takes them a long time to get out of Shenandoah Valley. Shenandoah Valley is no place to be in '62. Besides the Confederate Army, the Union Army, and all the deserters, it's not a very good place to be. But they do make it back up there. Johnny Walker shows up and going to take him by gunpoint back to Richmond, and so they have to kill him. And that takes place. And then they finally get across the river, and of course the Union troops arrest them immediately. But the Union troops belong to who? General Banks, the man they made big friends with before they left Washington, D.C., who liked them a lot. And so he immediately makes their safe trip and expedites their trip back to Washington, D.C. So they're gone almost 2 months. When they go to get their last $1,000 out of the French embassy, they're told they had a telegram. The French embassy told them that they had a telegraph from the man who had shot himself in the hand. He was well now and ready to come down and help them. And they telegraphed back to Washington, D.C., no, just stay there, we're on our way there. A couple of weeks we might be there ourselves. So, what then happened to this band of musketeers once they get back safely to there? C.C. Pierron was killed at the Battle of Gettysburg on July 2nd, 1863, after being appointed to General Hancock's staff. Potos joined the 5th U.S. Cavalry as an assistant surgeon. He was still alive in his mid-60s and met with Victor several times in New York City, where now he was a surgeon and doctor after getting out of the Union Army. Okay, then Victor, of course, is the long, long story, and I don't know how much we want to go into this, but it's a truly amazing story. Edward Stanton sends him to Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, of all places, to start the 97th Illinois Infantry. And he's second in command first, and then he's in command. And they fight for 3 years in the South, and they are so successful, it's unbelievable. They fight as the Army of Tennessee. They're in the Vicksburg campaign. They're in the Yazoo campaign. They're in all 47 days of the siege of Vicksburg. They're sent to Fort Hyman in Arkansas, and they storm the battalion, and Victor is given award after award, and eventually is given the Medal of Honor. He's the youngest and the first man from Nebraska ever to get it, and so he has a Medal of Honor here, if I didn't mention that yet. He's promoted to major. 8 days after he's promoted to major, he sends a proposal to Abraham Lincoln to let him to go to Memphis, Tennessee, and form a regiment twice the size of normal of 25,000 black men, and we have no idea how far they got or where it went. It's one of the few documents we can't find, but obviously he did not let him do it. Then they went to Port Gibson. They were the first Union soldiers across the Mississippi River at the start of the Vicksburg campaign, and of course there they fought who? The 1st Missouri Brigade. And then they took they were part of the group that took the Jackson, Mississippi state capitol there. And then of course they fought all the time around Vicksburg, and they continually were running into the 1st Missouri Brigade again there. In fact, at Champions Hill, they were shooting each other, most definitely, at that particular place. And then he demands a 28-day pass to go back home because the newspapers are full of Sioux Indians who are killing all the white people in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Nebraska territory. And so he gets the pass, and he goes straight to Tipton, Missouri first, and to his surprise, he finds his wife and all of his kids there, and they're safe. They've gone there to live with her folks to get out of that dangerous situation. And I don't know if it was a ruse or not, but he got a local doctor to say his lungs and kidneys were just horrible, and he needed another 30 days to rest up. And so he was granted another 30 days. I can tell you one thing, he wasn't too bad off because his 3rd child is conceived during that leave right there. So he must not have been too bad. Anyway, they go on to New Orleans and are successful. He is temporarily promoted to the Inspector General of the 4th Division of 13 Corps. Obviously, the man has some talent, and they think a great deal out of it. He's now Lieutenant Colonel. They go to Louisiana. They have more success. And finally, his family does go back home. And then just about the time his family gets back to this place in nowhere in Nebraska, 25 miles away, an entire settlement of whites are wiped out by the Indians. And so he resigns this commission to go back and help save them, and they say, no, you can't resign. You're not resigning, that's it. Stay here, everything will be all right out there, and so forth. So then when Sherman's march through Georgia starts, they're sent to Blakely, Alabama. And there again, they fight the Missouri Brigade at Fort Blakely. It's the largest, in case you didn't know it, that's the largest number of men in a battle in the whole Civil War. The Union side, including the 97th Illinois, have 45,000 men, and so many cannon and cavalry you can't count them. And they're fighting the men in Fort Blakely that have 10,000 men and 300 artillery pieces. And they make the charge of all charges, and he leads it all the way in hand-to-hand combat. And he practically single-handed, his group wins the battle down there in Mobile Bay area. And by the way, that was fought on a horrible, rainy, cold, miserable day. And it was the same day that Robert E. Lee had surrendered back at Appomattox Courthouse. But they didn't know it yet. They didn't know he'd surrendered. So anyway, and by the way, he gets the flag of the 1st Missouri Brigade. It's handed to him by whom? Cockrell, from nearby Lee Summit here, just down the road. He's the last commander of the 1st Missouri Brigade, and he actually gets the flag from him. So then then this is the funny part again. Then he is sent to Merriam Junction, Alabama, and his idea for them is him to get there and stop the railroad car that is coming down because the Union thinks Jefferson Davis is on it. That's the train he left Richmond to escape from. So he's got a second chance to get Jefferson Davis here. Jefferson Davis probably would have recognized him. Anyway, they tear up the town, they sit there in ambush, and the train comes, and he's not on it. 1 week later, Jefferson Davis is found in Georgia. They send him to Galveston, Texas. Abraham Lincoln commissions our Victor to be the commissioner to receive the surrender of General Kirby Smith. That's how high he's thought of. And then they make ready to go fight the French in Mexico, but the last minute they call him off, send him to Galveston, then send him back to Springfield, Illinois, and he gives this great big tearful goodbye to his troops, which I have a copy of. And of course they had fought 3 hard years right there in the South the whole time. So now he goes home. I'm hurrying out. I know I'm past my time here. He goes home, and you would think he would just stay home and farm, right? No. The Finnegan movement starts up. Those who don't remember, that's when all the veterans from both sides who were Irish went to the Canadian border with the idea of conquering 2 provinces and blackmailing Britain into letting Ireland go. So that doesn't work out, but they send Victor over. He's got no Irish blood. There's no reason for this guy to do it other than he likes to champion the low side, I guess. They send him over there, and he barely escapes with his life at the end of the Finnegan movement before Britain puts it down. And now he goes back to Nebraska for a while. He becomes a surveyor, land appraiser, pathfinder. He develops those 2 towns I talked about earlier. And he unsuccessfully runs for Congress, but he wins all the local and state elections and so forth. By the way, who was one of his best friends in the political world? William Jennings Bryan. Guy knew everybody. Then he became the publisher of the leading daily state Democrat in Lincoln, Nebraska. He championed the common man against all big monopolies. Then he became President Grover Cleveland's emissary to Colombia, where he won the Order of Double Dragon from the Emperor of China. Then they sent him to Panama, and he was successful again. And he goes home finally, and you think he's going to stay in Nebraska? No. The Cubans want freedom for Spain, and so he starts up the 3rd Nebraska National Guard as adjutant general. You see him on the horse there, and that's a handout. Oops. Okay. And so anyway, he goes off to Cuba, and when the Spanish flag comes down and Stars and Stripes go up, guess who's there? Victor's there. The guy is everywhere, I'm telling you. Then he went home and finally wrote the memoirs that we've been talking about. He dies in 1904. At 67, and they send the governors there. Everybody who's anybody in Nebraska is there. The governor's there. They send a whole band and a whole company of men leading that horse with the boots backwards in and all that, all the way to his family's house to pick all those relatives and take them all the way back to the cemetery. And it's one heck of a cemetery ceremony. It sounds a lot like Joe Shelby's here in Kansas City, but it was the other side, the other place. So anyway, I think that's enough. He gets buried there, and as you can see in your handout, which I need back, by the way, he has, there's a whole bunch of his relatives buried there. They had 8 children, their children had 8 children, and so there's a lot of those people buried, and still some up in the Nebraska area. So, any questions that you might answer?
Sounds like the Three Stooges.
Yeah, well, this guy's pretty successful, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, there's several attempts on his life, and I've got a hold of one of those by accident not too long ago, which included blacks being part of the plot to kill Jefferson Davis in Richmond. So there were several of those too, but this wasn't to kill him, it was only kidnapping.
He's quite the fellow.
Quite a fella.
Too bad he didn't fight for the South.
Yeah, he had a lot of potential, didn't he?
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.